So could you really build a complete spiritual foundation, the kind people spend their entire lives working on, in just 6 months? Well, that's the pretty bold claim at the heart of the Christ-centered spiritual transformation course. We've got a letter from the person who created it, laying out this whole accelerated path, so we're going to break down exactly what's being promised here.
Here's how we'll walk through it. First, we'll look at that 6-month promise itself. Then, we are going to unpack the actual teachings, what you'd learn. After that, we'll see what the course requires from students. And we'll finish up by exploring the ultimate goal of the whole thing, which the author just calls knowing.
All right, let's dive right into that central promise. This course makes a claim that really challenges the whole idea that true spiritual growth has to take decades or even a lifetime.
And the creator of this course doesn't mince words. The letter says, and I'm quoting here, "It does not take a lifetime to set this foundation of truth." That single statement is a direct shot at the idea that deep spiritual understanding is this long, drawn-out search.
And what's the timeline they give instead? Just 6 months. Yeah, a whole lifetime of growth, supposedly packed into one single, focused program.
So if the promise is a solid foundation in 6 months, the big question is, well, what's the foundation actually made of? Let's get into the core curriculum and see what the course says it will deliver.
Okay, so a key part of the course is this framework for understanding how you grow. Students are taught to recognize this recurring pattern in their lives. It kicks off with a new revelation, some kind of new insight. But that's always met with resistance. And finally, when you push through that, you get the reward. From there, the curriculum gets into some real heavy hitters of Christian theology. We're talking grace, faith, righteousness, sanctification, the whole shebang. But the goal here isn't just to give you dictionary definitions. It's for students to get a functional grasp on how these things actually work in their day-to-day lives.
And a huge piece of this is learning how to tell things apart, spiritually speaking. The course focuses on teaching students how to discern the difference between, say, the voice of their own conscience and the voice of the Lord, or the difference between just having a religious spirit and having true faith.
They also introduce this really central concept they call the law of the Spirit. It's presented as this New Testament principle, totally distinct from the Old Testament law of Moses, that helps a person find balance between what the course calls the two natures of man, that inner conflict between the spiritual and the carnal self.
And all this theology, right? It's not just theory. It's meant to lead to actual practical skills. The letter lists things like learning how to serve God with New Testament tools, how to overcome personal struggles, and how to be good stewards of God's grace.
Okay, so that's what the course offers. But what does it ask for in return? Let's shift gears and look at what's actually required from the student to hit that pretty ambitious 6-month target.
And look, the letter is super upfront about this. The 6-month thing, it's not a guarantee. Success is conditional. It really hinges on 2 key things from the student themselves.
And those 2 things are diligence and openness. Diligence is pretty straightforward. The letter says those who seek diligently are the ones who get rewarded. You got to put in the work. And openness is defined as being willing to overcome what the course calls past false indoctrination. So basically, you need to bring both the effort and a really receptive mindset to the table. They're non-negotiable.
So here's what that journey looks like, according to the letter. It starts with the very first lesson, where you've got to be patient as you learn a new spiritual language and design. The whole process that follows requires that diligent seeking and prayer we just talked about. And the result, after 6 months of this focused effort, is that promised foundation of truth.
Okay, this brings us to the big finale, the why. What is the ultimate point of this whole intensive process? Well, it all boils down to one simple but powerful concept: knowing.
This is where the course draws a really hard line in the sand. It makes a sharp distinction between knowing about God, intellectual head knowledge from years of study, and truly knowing God, which it defines as direct contact, as the very experience of eternal life. And they base this whole idea on this quote from the Gospel of John. In the way this course frames it, the act of knowing God isn't just a part of eternal life, it is eternal life. That's the definition.
To put it another way, the entire point of this course, as the letter says, is to learn how to literally touch God. It's not framed as an academic class in theology. It's positioned as a practical, hands-on guide to making that direct, personal contact.
And so the author's letter wraps things up with a question that's so simple, but so huge. It's a question aimed at the reader, and now it's aimed at you. Do you want to know Him? It's a question that reframes this whole 6-month journey from just a curriculum to be finished into a personal invitation to be considered.